Hi everyone, it's Joe from Walk with God. And in today's video, I want to address the question that you hear time and time again, can we really trust the Bible? And the more I kind of thought about this, and I think this was God revealing some of this to me and reminding me that we walk by faith and not by sight. Because people have been questioning the validity of biblical texts since we've had biblical texts. Even before stuff was written, as the events of the Bible were happening, people were questioning what was happening. And I don't think it's wrong or bad. I think the problem arises when we take these questions that we have and we frame the questions around our distrust. See, when we're doing that, we're not seeking the truth. We're seeking to confirm our mistrust. A lot of the times we come into questions like that already having made up our mind and asking the questions framed around the mindset that we've already decided, whether or not we trust the Bible. So if that's the mindset that you have, this video may or may not be for you. But I would encourage you, if there's a part of you that actually wonders if the Bible is valid, keep watching. And more than that, ask yourself, how do we know that any written text is valid? How do you know that your history books are valid? Because a lot of the arguments that people make about the validity of the Bible have to do with, not being there or certain things not always adding up 100%. But remember that the way history is presented, non-biblical history, is presented by people who lived years after the event, because history is being interpreted as it happens. I mean, look at what's going on right now with the global pandemic around COVID-19. We're still figuring out exactly where it originated. We're still figuring out the exact symptoms of the virus, the effects that it's having on people in terms of the death toll, in terms of the mental effects it's even having on some people, the way that it's affecting our economy and our lifestyles. I mean, there's just a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that we will know, a decade, a couple decades, even more down the line. When you look into how most history is written in terms of where we get our information from, how that information is presented, what we have in our history textbooks and what we're teaching people is not always this pure version of history, and yet we accept that. I mean, shoot, on some level, I accept that too when I read non-biblical history. But back to being able to trust the Bible, you have mistrust of the idea of supernatural, God's existence, miracles, everything like that. But on the other hand, you have people who mistrust the Bible because it says things that they don't always like. Saying you don't like something that was said is different than saying you don't like that something actually happened. But does your liking that something that was said really mean that it was never said in the first place? Or does it just mean that you don't like what it was said and it's easier for you to deny it than to accept it? So that's the question that I want to ask for people who struggle with some of the things the Bible says that they don't like. Now, if you struggle with the idea of the validity of the Bible, I want you to think about something. How do we know that any historical text comes from a source or is a valid source of information? We really need two things when it comes to the validity of a historical text. We need lots of copies, and those copies needs to have internal consistency, aka they need to look like the same thing. So that's how we know that we can take something seriously, is it has those two things, the internal consistency and lots of copies. Pretty much no one doubts that Shakespeare wrote his many poems and plays. I've never heard anyone question Homer's Iliad or the Odyssey. And I can't think of anyone who said that they don't think the, Greek philosophers didn't exist or that they didn't write their writings. But if you add those three categories up, the Greek philosophers, Homer's works, and the works of Shakespeare, combined, there is less consistency between all of those works than the consistency within the works of the New Testament of the Bible, and far, far fewer copies. I mean, we're talking a few thousand next to tens of thousands. So the Bible really wins in both objective senses. Now, if some of the things in the Bible happen that seem a little preposterous, like God in the flesh coming down and rising from the dead, that's where you look at the sources. So the sources, the Bible, Gospels that tell us the life of Jesus were written by men who died for their faith. Gruesome, grisly deaths. I think John was the only disciple who died in exile. Everyone else died because they were skinned or burned alive. I think one was beheaded. I think Peter was crucified upside down. Horrible things. Limbs pulled apart by carts of animals. Just the worst deaths, torture. Back then, Christianity was not a source of money. They left everything they had. They had things that they left for torture and death and living on the run. Why would they do that if they didn't believe that they had found something better, someone better who they spoke to? And if you're really curious about the evidence and you haven't actually made up your mind and you're trying to support it by trying to tear down the Bible, I would encourage you to read or watch the movie of Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. You can also do YouTube and Google searches for information that provides you, resources that direct you to the historical Jesus outside of the Bible and why we can trust what's in the Gospels. And you can look up science in the Bible. Yes, there's scientific facts stated in the Bible hundreds of years plus before we actually knew about it. Like the water cycle is mentioned several times in the Old Testament. Hundreds, sometimes actually a couple thousand years before we knew or even theorized that maybe water actually rises up into the air, into clouds, and then disperses. And that's how the water cycle works. It's talked about in the Bible several times. So yeah, do your research if you really are curious about this. But if you have already made up your mind, then I would just encourage you to think about why it is that you made up your mind. Was it really because the historical evidence for the validity of the biblical text is not there? Or was it because it's hard to hear that you're a sinner and need the grace of God, or that you would need to give up a sinful lifestyle? And it's okay if you struggle with that hard truth. Everyone does. I did for a while, but he's worth it. Following Jesus is worth it. Jesus bled and died on the cross that all who were willing to believe in him would follow and know him. And I would encourage you to at least think about that. Read the Bible a little bit more. Pray about it. See what God does. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your time. I'm going to talk more about specific biblical topics and not why you can trust the Bible moving forward, because other people cover that so much better than me. Meanwhile, please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, share this video, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And guys, I'll see you in the next video. Have a blessed day or a blessed night. Thanks again for watching.